Hello and welcome to the second part of flight planning in ProATC. My name's Clive, aka Alpha117, and I'm the forum moderator over at ProATC and currently working alongside Morad, who is the developer of ProATC. I'm also a forum mod over at Avsim as well. I've been flight planning and using Flight Simulator for quite a few years. Just get some basic stuff out of the way first. Firstly, this is recorded on the 26th of December 2012, and this is recorded with version 1137, which is the current version out there. If you're using a version prior to 1137, then please update to this version. If you're using a version greater than 1137, then that's fine, there's no problem at all with that whatsoever. So that's the version I'm using from here. And again, if you've got any feedback, whether it's good, bad or indifferent, then please drop us a line over on our forums here in video tutorial feedback. It's great to get some feedback, whether it's good, bad or indifferent. It's just so that I can make these videos better as we go forward. Also, I just wanted to dispel another myth while we're here, which I've seen on certain other places in the community, about people saying that we actually delete any negative feedback that we receive about ProATC. And I want to go on record now to say that is so false, it's unbelievable. There is no way that I or Morad will delete anything that is written about the product on any forum, whether it's negative, good, bad or indifferent. So anyway, just want to put that to bed, and that dispels that myth that I've seen flying around by certain people within the community. Okay, so just drop us some feedback, guys, whether it's good, bad or indifferent. So I'm trying to make these. If I haven't explained anything, or you're not quite sure, or you want to say, well, can you do a video on this bit, then yeah, there's no problem with that at all, and I'll do whatever you would like to see going forward. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So that's the basics out of the way. Okay, from here, and we're going to be looking at flight planning, as I said, and the advanced flight planning within ProATC. I'm not going to cover anything in the introduction to flight planning, which is a previous video, and please watch that before you watch this one, because you'll pick up some really good stuff from that one. And if you haven't watched the introduction video as well, then I'd recommend that you watch that one as well. Again, it gets you some basic stuff out the way. Alright, okay, so flight planning, let's have a look then, shall we? What is flight planning? Good question. What is flight planning? Well, flight planning is actually how you get an aircraft from a departure airport to a destination airport along a route. So that's the first important part to grasp on that. And that route is a known route that is written down and passed to certain people prior to the aircraft being prior to departure of the aircraft, and normally that's passed to air traffic control. So that's the basics of a flight plan. Another thing I want to cover first before we go into the flight planning screen is a flight plan is divided into three parts. You have the route, which is basically the route that the aircraft will fly to get from its departure to its destination. The other two parts are how do you actually get the aircraft to the route from the departure airport, and how do you get from the end of the route to the destination. And they have some technical names. The departure is called the SID, Standard Instrument Departure, and how do you get to the arrivals? Well, that's called the Standard Arrivals Procedures. These are known procedures, the SIDS and the STARS, and a flight crew would have maps and charts for all these for their departure and arrival airports. So you get from departure, as you can see here, look, up onto your route, and the point where your SID joins your route is called your SID transition. So it's the SID transition, okay? And ProATC has a little acronym for that, SIDTS, SID transition. And going to the other end, as you can see here, so how do we get from the end of our route down to our arrival airports? Okay, it's called the STAR transition. And this point here, the point at the end of your route, is called the STAR transition. And again, ProATC has an acronym for that, STATS. So that's your three parts of your route. Okay, so you need to have an understanding of, we start with a SID. At the end of our SID, it goes to a SID transition. We fly along our route. We come at the end of our route to a STAR transition, and then we go along our STAR and we land at our departure, at our arrival. Okay, so that's the basics of the three parts of a route. Alright, so let's have a look then of how we're going to do this manually. I'm going to show you how we do this in ProATC, and previous ones we saw how we actually created a manual route, and it's the same screen whether you're going to do it manually or whether you're going to do it automatically and let ProATC do it for you. I'm going to create a very simple route again, and it's going to be the good old favourite route from Birmingham in the UK across to Schiphol and Amsterdam. So one of the first things I'm going to do here is turn off this button here. Okay, in the previous video we left it on and ProATC generated all the legs down this column here. But this time we're going to turn it off. Alright, and you know it's off because it goes to red, and we turn it on and off by just clicking the button. Okay, once it's turned off, then as we start to manually create our route on the map here, ProATC X will not start to auto-generate the route as we're going along. Okay, so that's the first thing I'm going to do. The next thing, I'm just going to show you, while the map is quite empty, a good little tool that's handy if you're going to manually start creating routes. And one of the things we can do is we can do a distance bearing from 2 points. And to do that, all I do is wherever I want to start from, I click and hold my middle button and I click and drag. Hey, look at that, eh? Pretty cool. Wherever I want to go, okay, from point A to point B. And if you look, it gives me how the distance in nautical miles and the bearing. Alright, and I can change that around, okay, and I can move it from there to there, and it gives me the distance and the bearing. Now that's very handy for manually, but it also very handy as an assistance also, okay, if you do PDG, place, bearing and distance, okay, planning in your FMC. That's advanced planning, place, bearing, distance, waypoints. The NGX can do it, PGM's NGX can do that, no problem. If you are learning the new Aerosoft AX Airbus, then their McDo at the moment can't do PBD planning in on their McDo. It looks like their forms that it will come, and the functionality of that will be actually added, I think, in a service pack to do place, bearing, distance, waypoints. Okay, so that's a little tool, handy. Okay, so we're just holding the middle mouse button down, clicking and dragging it around. Okay, and it gives us, alright, the distances and the bearings from that. So that's handy, and if you are aware of doing PBD programming on FMCs, then that's great. So that's a tool to aid you there for that. So that's a good tool to use for that. Okay, so just to recap what we first need to do. So ProATC needs to know 4 things before it can actually, you can do the route. So the 4 things it needs are, number 1, it needs to know the departure airport. Number 2, it needs to know the arrival airport. So they're the first 2 things that it needs to know. So let's have a look at those first. So the first thing, I'm going to actually activate the airports, and here we are. I'm just going to scroll in. Okay, a quick in the middle here, and here's Birmingham. And remember the functionality if I mouse over any airport, and I showed you this in the previous video. Okay, and I'm going to right click, and I've got some options here. Okay, airports, we can add this airport as a departure or add it as a destination because they're active. And if I come down to here, look, these other options here are greyed out. I've got nothing to select here. Okay, so it's quite intuitive of what you can select. So in our case for this demo, we're going to add the airport as departure. Look across here onto the flight plan bit here. We first of all added our first part is the airport. Alright, Birmingham Echo Golf Bravo Bravo. So that's point 1 sorted. Point 2, as I previously stated, it needs to know where you're going to go. In our case, we're going to go to Schiphol, and again we're going to right click. Now if you've made a mistake, you can actually change the departure airport. Alright, so if you think you want to go the other way and went, no, I need to go from Amsterdam back to Birmingham, you can change it here. But in our case, we just want to add this airport as a destination. Alright, now look here, we've got point 1, our destination, our departure, and point 2, our arrival. And ProATC has done what it knows, because it only knows 2 bits of data so far. It's done a straight line. Okay, and again I can do right click and drag. Okay, and we get 239. If you look at the bottom left hand corner here, we've got our flight plan distance calculated there. Alright, and we can use that for any fuel planning that we want to do. So that's the first 2 points covered that ProATC needs to know before it can start allowing you to generate or put a manual route in. The next 2 points it needs to know before it actually does the route part or the route segment of your flight plan is it needs to know how to get from your SID to the start of the route, and it also needs to know how to get from the end of the route to the star. So we need to now tell ProATC what our transition points are for our departure and for our arrival, and that's quite easy to do. I'll show you both ways of doing it. If you are manually doing this, okay, you can choose any VOR or NDB that you like. I'll take the airport overlay off and we'll put the VOR overlay on, and here's all the VORs in this area around Birmingham. Now I can choose any of these points I like to be the transition point of our route. Okay, so this is going to be the SID transition for our route. Okay, so we can actually highlight it. Now this time it knows it's not an airport, it's going to be a SID or a star because it doesn't know it at the moment. Okay, we can't add a waypoint. In other words, we can't start our route at this point because it doesn't know the 4 points. It only knows 2 so far, the departure and the arrival airport. We've now got to give it the other 2 pieces of data. So this time we're going to say yes, the point I've highlighted is going to be the SID transition. You'll notice up here we've now got a VOR DTY, Daventry, is now the SDDTS, the SID transition. So it now knows 3 of the 4 points. Now we need to give it, okay, the star transition. In other words, we've got to the end of our route now, and how do we get from the end of our route onto the star and to land at our destination? Now you'll notice that in Amsterdam there's not many points, okay, across here, not VORs, NDBs, but okay, there's a lot of intersections here. Alright, now some of the you can use intersections as well, okay, as a star transition. Alright, so if I set red far, okay, and that's going to be add selection point as a star transition, and there it is. Okay, I'll turn the intersections off. So we've now got the star transition, and we've also got the SID transition into our start of our manual flight plan. Now they're the 4 bits of data that ProATC needs to have before we start to plan the route, which is from here to there. Okay, so it's from the SID transition to the star transition. In this case, I use my tool, it's only just over 132 nautical miles. Okay, our route. So our actual route, okay, is only that. Alright, it's only 132.07 nautical miles. But again here, look, we've got a total flight plan route of 245 nautical miles. Because here's our first part, here's our middle part, and there's our third part. Okay, so that's what we need to do. So once we've got that, we can now start to add our waypoints, our NDBs to our route. And that's quite simple to do. Okay, we're going to make sure the VOR overlay is active so we can see where we want to go, and we can choose any of these points we want. Okay, we, for example, and I'm going to use it so it looks totally daft, we might want this one here. We right click, and now, okay, we can add selected waypoint. Alright, because it knows the 4 points. Remember before it had the transition points, this was greyed out, this option here. And now it knows the 4 parts. This now option here is now become active. So I can select that, and it will add that in to the route. Okay, so our route's now coming from our SID up to our SID transition, and we now, once we passed our SID transition, we're now going to go along here and into there. We may, for example, now let's highlight the NDB. Okay, we may now want to come down to this NDB here. Okay, and we can right click, and again it's part of the route, so we can add a selected waypoint, and it adds the waypoint into that. And you'll notice over here it does that as well. Okay, it's a direct. Okay, so that's as simple as that really, and we can start to add as many as we want. Okay, we can actually, if we say, well, we don't want that anymore, we don't want to go to this VOR, we can just click it and delete it. Alright, and it will then recalculate or re-put the route in for you. Okay, and again, if we want to add here, we can right click, add selected waypoint, and it does that as well, and it puts in there. You'll notice also it's actively changing the flight plan distance. Alright, and that's the distance you use for your fuel calculations. Alright, not your route, not just the route part, which is the middle part of the flight plan. It's your SID, your route, and your star. Okay, and that's what this calculates here. Alright, so don't get confused and try and think, well, hold on a minute, I've just got to use, okay, my distance from there to there. It's only 133 miles. Okay, well, we can go from there to there, and then from there to there. Alright, so that's the distance to the left hand corner. Okay, so that's how we actually create a manual, very simple manual flight plan. Okay, so once we've done that, we can change whatever we do. We can then come down here to save it. alright, and fly this route. Okay. Before we do that, one thing I want to show you is how we can set altitude restrictions to waypoints. The SIDS and the STAR altitude restrictions are actually set in the AirAct data that you import into ProATC. So they are fixed, they are known real world route, waypoint restrictions. But apart from that, anything on the route, unless dictated to by ATC, you can actually set. And how do you do that? If I actually right click, okay, and I can edit the waypoint altitude here, alright, and you get this little window that opens here. Now it defaults to none. There's no restriction on this waypoint here, and there's also nothing out here either. But we can set three things. We can give it at an altitude. In other words, you have to be at this specific altitude when you reach that waypoint, or at or above, or at or below. So let's use at altitude, and we can select whatever altitude that you decide you want to be at. Okay, and then click save. You'll notice over here then we have a altitude restriction set there, and ProATC X will make sure that you meet this altitude restriction. Okay, so that's how we do that. Alright, and we can set that also for any part of the route. Okay, any part of the route, which is the middle part. Okay, not the SID, not the STAR, but just the route. Okay, I call it route part B of the route. I always call the SID part A of the route itself part B, and the STAR is part C. Okay, so we've got A, B and C. So this is only you can do for part B of your flight plan. Alright, so that's one way of actually doing it manually. Another way you can do up here, if you look at these drop down boxes here, SID transitions and STAR transitions, you can change it and pick the ones that's in the AirAct data, or we can choose Cowley in this case, and it changes it for us. Okay, or we can change to TNT and it changes it for us. And notice down here the route, the flight plan, distances is changing. Okay, so these in this drop down are from the AirAct data, so these are real world SID and SID transitions. Okay, or the transition points of SIDs. Okay, we do the same for the arrivals. Okay, and these are the STAR transitions. Okay, that are taken from the AirAct data. So if I didn't like the one I've got, I think, oh, that's rubbish, I can click another one. Okay, or undo the red file one. Alright, which is a common one out the UK into that, and as well as the LAMSO transition into Amsterdam as well. So those are two standard ones that are out the UK for that. So there's two ways of doing that. And again, if you don't like that, you can just highlight it and press the delete key on the keyboard, and that does the standard routing there. Okay, that's really about it. And just don't forget to set your gates across here. You can also cruise altitude you can change as well here. Alright, so whatever you want to do to change. Okay, and also remember this here is a free text box here, and can write whatever you want in there, just to remind you. I just normally write in there, you know, manually created route. Okay, or if it's an FS build route, I'll put FS build route in there. So that's how you create, very simply and very easily, a manual route on that, and how we can add and take away waypoints. Alright, and we can add them back in by just right clicking. Okay, add the selected waypoint. Also, here's a little option here. Okay, if you know the code, alright, you can place it in there and click OK. Alright, that's another way of doing it. But if it's on the map, I find it easy on the map to right click. Okay, add waypoint. I can right click, add waypoint. So you can very quickly generate, okay, a route. Okay, I'm going to be daft and add that route to there, which makes it totally irrelevant. If I don't like that last one, for example, I can just highlight it, click delete, and we're back to something that resembles a bit of a real world route here. And that's really basically about what this is on that one. That's all there is to this video, I think. The next video I'll do will be on some more advanced stuff. I'll show you some other ways of changing routes, of what we can do on that. Also bear in mind, I'll do a video on how you actually import the AirAC data and how you make sure that ProATC knows about your scenery and how you actually update the scenery database. So that's the advanced planning of how you add and subtract waypoints from that, and how you can select altitude restrictions for your different waypoints, okay, by right clicking, alright, select your altitude, and the three options you've got here: at the altitude, at or above, or at or below. Alright, so you can set those to whatever you want, okay, and the restrictions will appear on the list, okay, upon this here, okay. And that's it for this one. Alright, I hope it's okay. Again, as I said at the beginning, if you've got any questions, any feedback on this video, then please drop us a line on our forums, and I'll come back to you as soon as I can. Fantastic, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video. Bye bye.